When you ask a group of people the difference between wealth and power, you will find out that most will struggle to distinguish between both. The trouble is, both are very similar concepts, but even in their similarity, we can tell they are not exactly the same, even though most people can't really explain how. But you will agree with us that in today's world, there is no true power without wealth, for wealth is the currency of the powerful. Stick around as we explore the link between both to find out how wealth ultimately becomes power, and how the most powerful take all the world's wealth for themselves. Among the two of them, wealth is the easier to define. The Oxford Dictionary simply puts it as a large amount of money, property, etc. that a person or country owns. Now that's straightforward. On the other hand, power has been attributed to so many things over the years. Some say knowledge is power, while to others, money or wealth is power. Female American singer SZA, in her 2019 song featuring The Weeknd and Travis Scott, simply put it, power is power. But according to the Oxford Dictionary, power is the ability to control people or things. Now, taking a closer look at both definitions, one wonders, does controlling something equate to owning it? Or can one truly control what he doesn't own? And therein lies the confusion. We can't, however, deny the fact that some of the most powerful individuals in the world today possess great wealth. Wealth being marketable assets like real estates, stocks and bonds, etc. There is also no denying the fact that their influence stretches to their control over people too. Going back in time, wealthy men, among other properties, owned slaves. Today that practice no longer exists, but with the concentrated nature of capitalism, we wouldn't be too far from the truth if we said that the wealthy few own the rest of us. This assertion is largely due to undeniable wealth inequality. To get a clearer picture, let us take a look at the wealth distribution in the world today. The wealthiest 1% enjoy all the benefits of wealth, including influence, which we can liken to power. Simply put, wealth buys influence. Data from the Credit Suisse Research Institute indicates that the bottom half of the global population owns less than 1% of the total wealth, while the richest 10% hold 88% of the world's wealth, with the top 1% alone accounting for 50% of the global asset. Interestingly, data has also shown that in America, as of 2013, the 1% own 36.7% of all privately held wealth in the country, while on the flip side, the bottom 80% held only 11% of the country's private wealth. Narrowing it down to financial wealth, only 10% of the population held 84 to 94% of the stocks, bonds, business equity, trust fund, and non-home real estate. This implies that the 10% virtually own the entire country. This increasing inequality is largely due to market concentration and the accumulation of wealth and economic power by a relatively small number of ultra-rich individuals. The wealth inequality is, however, not accidental. With great wealth comes leverage, and leverage is a condition for control. The wealthy, using their leverage, influence policymaking in most countries, and as such, fiscal and regulatory policies are centered at weakening the public sector and enabling the accumulation of wealth among the few. One can, however, trace this concentration of wealth to the Industrial Revolution. The rise of capitalism changed the economic landscape of most countries, encouraging the rise of big corporations. Often referred to as the Gilded Age, the period between 1870s to the 1900s was a period of serious industrialization, which resulted in immense prosperity for the wealthy few and extreme poverty for the working class. Prominent businessmen like John D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie, and Cornelius Vanderbilt gained control of the entire economic sector, gaining a monopoly on those sectors. While the wealthy became even more wealthy, the majority of the population lived in abject poverty, working in the factories owned by these prominent men. According to data from the PBS American Experience documentary Gilded Age, by 1897, the top 1% of the U.S. population, which represented about 4,000 families, had almost the same wealth as the other 11.6 million families put together. Widespread industrialization resulted in a wider wealth gap between the poor and the rich, since only those with capital could engage in economic activities profitability. In addition, a fair share of the wealth accumulated during this period has been proven by history to have persisted over generations. The wealthy will do almost anything to keep the wealth they captured within their families, while the rest of the population, which is usually the majority, fight to get their hands on what is left. But even though the Industrial Revolution ended years back, The capitalist ideology it inspired still exists in most parts of the world today. In capitalism, the working class has to sell their labor to help produce goods and services for the wealthy few who own the means of production. Although they are paid for the labor, they are never fully compensated for the full value of their labor. Their bosses pay them only a tiny fraction of their full productivity while retaining a larger bulk of the profits which accumulate to make them billionaires. Observe the cycle. The wealthy become even more wealthy as they gain more control over the working class, who are forced to depend on them for survival, meaning that as billionaires get richer, global poverty and wealth inequality increase, further deepening their level of influence. In essence, with capitalism, labor has become a replaceable commodity as billionaire owners of big corporations are more than ready to replace their workers with new workers who are willing to do the job for less. In some cases, factories are shut down and relocated to other countries where labor laws are not too strict and the cost of labor is cheaper. These billionaires know that their relevance is dependent on making more money, even as they ensure that they keep the circle small. Because if wealth is evenly distributed, they are no longer as powerful as they currently are. But perhaps the biggest proof of how wealth can be used to purchase power is in politics. With wealth comes not just economic security, but also socio-political power. Growing financial inequality more often than not results in political inequality, which then opens the doors for billionaire owners of big corporations to influence economic policymaking to safeguard their wealth. We can also say that to a large extent they also get to decide who governs a country through fundraisers and financing political campaigns. This way they subtly purchase the person in power who in turn protects their interests. For instance, in the US, the top 0.01% were responsible for about 40% of the total election campaign's funding in 2016. Acts like this intentionally shift bargaining power away from the working class to the wealthy few. Legislators frequently socialize with the wealthiest in society, understanding the needs of the few better. Given their proximity to the corridors of power, it isn't much of a surprise that when the interests of the rich and the middle class clash in matters of policies, wealth almost always has their way. A good example would be on income-based issues like social welfare, taxes, and business regulation. The wealthy are often opposed to new redistributive policies, and they often get their way. Billionaire owners of mega corporations are usually more reluctant to raise the minimum wage than the general population. And sometimes politicians are also reluctant because many of them are rich business owners. Also, with the decline in labor unions, the power of the elites and big corporations trumps that of organized labor. It is, however, safe to say that democracy favors the rich, since most times only the rich can fulfill the many requirements to contest for political positions. By the time the electorates get to the polls, they are presented with ballots filled with wealthy individuals, and they pretty much have no other option but to choose from among them. However, politics isn't the only power playground of the wealthy. The elites have always controlled the media, and with that comes the ability to control the narrative. Recall that power is the ability to control things. With how powerful the media is, resting on the arms of a privileged few, it becomes a potent tool for mass control. They determine what goes out as news and what is appropriate enough for the public to discuss. Even though the media has historically claimed to be neutral, it would be asking for far too much to expect them to go against their owners. But more recently, it seems as though billionaires are now more than ever interested in owning media houses. Jeff Bezos in 2013 purchased The Washington Post. At about the same time, billionaire John Henry acquired the Boston Globe. In 2014, Glenn Taylor acquired Star Tribune. Also, Patrick Soon-Shiong bought Los Angeles Times in 2018, with Mark Benioff also acquiring Time magazine the same year. Now, this is just to mention a few, so make out what you want from the information. If you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe to the channel because it helps a lot. Put your suggestions down in the comment section so we know what you guys want to see next. Till then, stay safe.